great to have you back. I am so excited to dive deeper into learning a little bit more about what you do, because I know last time we talked about shifting your income and having those advantages, but I feel like there's a lot more to what you do. And I wanted to give everyone watching the opportunity to know you a little bit more and really get some firsthand knowledge through this case study that you and I have been talking about over the past couple weeks. So before we begin, if this is someone's first time, meeting you per se, why don't you just give them a brief intro as to who you are, what you do, and your background?
Definitely. It's good to be back, and I'm happy we've been able to work on this together. So my name is Dion. I am your bookkeeping expert. Not yours particularly, but that's actually my DBA since we last spoke.
Love
So I
it.
do have the firm DRBS LLC, and I started a DBA because I really want to exploit essentially the main thing that I do, which is bookkeeping.
Mhm.
And I use bookkeeping essentially as a foundation for the other areas of business. So bookkeeping is a vital part in essentially managing your finances. And let's say a business that wants to engage in marketing, I'm essentially a big foundation, a big stepping stone into determining what type of marketing budget they can have, and essentially any other budget that would come. Additionally, bookkeeping is great because it allows a business owner to organize all of their finances.
That's great. I think bookkeeping is excellent. In fact, I was actually talking with one of my friends about how he needs to hire a bookkeeper. So I'm glad that you have this DBA because I can quite literally pitch it to him as your bookkeeping expert. So I love that. Congrats on the new DBA.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank
I
you.
think I think we should just dive right into this case study. So to give everybody an idea of what this case study is about, can you tell us a little bit about the client and the overall challenge that you needed to kind of analyze in this situation?
Yeah, definitely. So just to keep this company's confidentiality, we'll just refer to them throughout the case study as client. And basically, so this client is a single location. They're a fast casual dining restaurant, and they were established around October 2016. Their challenge at that point was, as a new business owner, there was no bookkeeping infrastructure set up. And since that wasn't set up, it was very difficult for them to essentially really know the financial health of their business. And so we did talk about kind of setting up that marketing budget. It'd be hard to know essentially where you can allocate your funds if you don't know, one, how much is coming in, and two, how much you've already spent. So this client really needed a strong foundation to be able to organize their finances.
Okay, and just so we can make sure everyone else is caught up to speed, we're specifically talking about a marketing budget because in the first video, in part one, we were talking about shifting our income as business owners, whether you're a full-time business owner or part-time business owner, to expenses that can be written off and ultimately lower your tax liability. So if you haven't watched part one of the video, make sure you go back and watch it because this example that Dion and I are going over right now is really going to be important for you to understand exactly what it is that he talked about in the first part. So you're talking about setting up a marketing budget for this client, this single location. And, you're talking about the issues that they had or the challenges, I should say. So can you talk us through the journey and overall discovery that you had with them throughout the entire process?
Definitely, yeah. So the client hired a tax firm to handle their tax preparation and tax filing. At that time, bookkeeping was kind of overlooked. They didn't really think it'd be a big asset to the business. But until they were requesting financial reports from this tax firm, and months would go by. Actually, I think a year or two actually went by and they had not seen any financial documentation. So as this client started to grow and started to say, okay, well, we've reached a point, we want to go further. What could we do?
Mhm.
And he kind of came to me he just wasn't sure what to do because he didn't know how much he was making. He didn't know what his expenses were. He didn't even know what his profit was. So in terms of him taking a salary, it was very difficult for him to know what was a reasonable salary that wouldn't affect business operations. So basically, as they were looking for this tax firm to prepare their financial statements and those never came in, the client basically wasn't taking full advantage of the deductions on their tax filings. And in addition, they essentially had a lack of any monthly bookkeeping. Again, meaning that any business decisions that they would be presented with or that they needed to make, they were unable to essentially make informed decisions, which would in turn lead to overdraft fees because they spent too much money, or not spending enough money, which in turn led to lower revenue in the next month. And basically what we did at this point was he came to me and wanted essentially to know the financial health of the business. Now, when he started in 2016, and we started working together in 2018. So for 2 years, he had no financial information. We had to start with essentially cleanup. So we got all of these bank statements entered into QuickBooks, which would allow us to produce reliable reports that would tell a story about the business. Through these financial statements, I was able to tell him exactly how his business went. I was able to tell him his slow season. I was able to tell him his busy season. I was able to tell him what was his most profitable months. So even at this point, where we do this kind of cleanup that we call it, we catch the business owner up, and the client now has a background, right? They have a foundation. We can start forecasting for the future. And one of those forecasting things that we did was actually we set up a marketing budget. We did consult with an actual marketing professional, because I'm not a marketing professional, but essentially I was able to help him determine how much he could allocate to marketing without ruining his profitability.
Okay.
Which again is, which would be a tax deduction, right? So we're strategically shifting our income to spend a little bit more on marketing. And in turn, we saw a bigger return on growth. So we saw a huge ROI.
It's interesting because, I'm listening to you talk about 2 years, 2 years without data. And that's just, from my perception, I feel like a lot of businesses are probably in a similar situation. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but all of my friends that I've met are, networks that own their own businesses. They're on either end of the spectrum. They either are totally all about bookkeeping or don't think it's necessary at all. There is no in between. And, I'm listening to you talk about identifying trends in terms of slow seasons or fast seasons, or being able to forecast and allocate this money that had a significant return on investment. I think that right there just proves the importance of having someone like you if you're starting a business. So, talk to me a little bit more about this solution that you came up for them. You caught them up for 2 years, but and you were able to do this forecasting, but what else went into that? Were there any fees associated? What did that look like for them?
Okay, definitely. Yeah. So I'll kind of just talk about the timeline. So typically when we onboard a new client, we're going to go through essentially an assessment of their books. So we're going to essentially review their books and see if there are any errors. We're going to make sure that the books are reconciled, just meaning that the bank balance actually matches the statement balances. And in this case, since there was no initial, foundation, there was no bookkeeping system, we were creating it. So at $1,000 a year, basically what we did was we caught this client up to date with their bookkeeping. So this cleanup was $2,000 for 2 years in total, and all the transactions were entered into the books, and we were able to again get a story of essentially the financial health of the business from day one up to current at that point.
Hmm.
And essentially going forward, he was or they were so happy that they decided to continue working with us on a month-to-month basis. So what we did is we created an engagement, basic bookkeeping package, which is just $250 a month. And what we do in that package is not only actually go through the monthly bookkeeping to make sure that the books are kept up to date and audit proof, but we also go through a monthly meeting where we will produce reliable reports that are vital and so important in the decision-making process of a business owner. Although the cost, initially it might seem kind of unattractive to a potential client of ours, after he was able to actually get reports initially and see, okay, this is what happened, and then had the idea that if I continue to do this on, I can make informed decisions. I can know when the season, when there's seasonality. Let's say if they're in a certain region, maybe they're located in a college town, they can know, okay, well, this is what sales will be at that time. So it's so important that so that they can manage their employees and their payroll cost.
So tell me where this client is now. What are they doing with you guys, and how are they performing now that they have you hired full time?
Okay, so the biggest success for this client, and I wish I could share who it is because you guys would be really excited, but this client is actually now in the process of franchising. So this single location is now going to expand. And this was only made possible from us being able to implement a reliable bookkeeping system that produced reports that were essentially the stepping stone to every business decision. So, for example, he's going to have potential, I guess we can call them investors or franchisees that are going to want to know, well, if I invest X amount up front, when am I going to get my money back? These reports essentially are going to be able to answer that question. So if if we replicate this location's numbers in a new location, this is what you can expect. This is what you can do in the future using historical data. You can forecast and essentially help maximize the profitability of the business. And to date, we are still we still manage the books for them. They're still a client. And in the first year that we worked with them, we were able to help them save $30,000, because what we did was, once we got everything in the books, we said, okay, well, let's look at all the expenses that are occurring monthly and what's necessary to the business and what's not necessary. So those things that were essentially not a vital expense to the business, we cut them out. A big thing that people think is very small, overdraft fees. This business kept incurring overdraft fees. So essentially, we implemented a system that specifically helped them save $8,000 in overdraft fees a year, and bank charges actually.
$8,000
$8,000.
bank charges? Do you have anything else that you would like to add to this case study before we move on to the final questions here?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things in cost justification, someone thinking like, or even in particular this client, thinking, well, are the fees for a bookkeeper justified? So if you can find a bookkeeper that can help you save $30,000, I'm pretty sure you'd have no issue with being able to pay them a total of like $3,000 a year.
For anyone watching this video that owns their own business or is thinking about owning their own business, if you don't have a bookkeeper, you need to talk to Dion at least to get a quote. His contact info is on the screen. So make sure that you reach out to him by any one of those methods. Or if you just have questions and want to pick his brain, right? You just want to get a consultation, you can do that too. Dion, it has been a pleasure having you on the channel once again. And I cannot wait to see how this whole client franchising situation goes for you. I'm really excited for this opportunity for you, and I hope you have a wonderful night.
You as well. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope you have an amazing night as well.